Hello and welcome to today's Coffee and Coaching Club. 30 minutes of actionable insights to build your business communication confidence. And today we're going to talk about how to start and end your talks with pizzazz. What goes in the middle we'll refer to very tangentially, but the truth of the matter is if you don't catch people's attention right away, you're in trouble. So allow me to introduce my wonderful program manager, Margaret, who will tell you about how to ask some Q&A about our topic of starting and ending your talks with pizzazz. Margaret?
Good morning and a pizzazzy morning to everyone. Trivia, if you ever get asked the question, what is one word you can't make in Scrabble? Pizzazz is the word. I actually won trivia night once by knowing that answer. So, on the bottom of the Zoom panel that you're in watching Marjorie's presentation, you'll see a box called Q&A. And if you open that up, you will be able to ask any questions that come up during the session. There is time at the end where we will cover all the questions. And if we don't get to your question, we will be sure to circle back with you after the session.
By the way, you will not see that Q&A box unless you kind of put your mouse down over it. It's hiding. So that you can see all my gorgeous slides. Alrighty, so here we go. So there are a couple perspectives that I invite you to look at when we talk about starting and ending talks. First is we're going to look at what are some landmines, some dangerous things to avoid. And then we're going to talk about some strategies to embrace to cause that pizzazz reaction. So there's a challenge when you're starting a talk. There's some things that people do that actually are counterproductive to getting the eager attention of your audience. So here's some startup, what I call landmines. First of all is thanking people. Now I know that we're all trained to be polite and somebody introduces you and you say thank you. But that is not a strong way to begin. You can thank the person in advance of the talk, you can thank the person after, but not as a way to start your talk. If you want, you can give a person a nod in their direction, but don't start with long thank yous or even short ones. Excuse me. Second of all is introducing yourself. When you start talking about yourself, that is a really bad way to start. If you want to share with people what your authority is and your expert status, there's a way of intertwining that into your remarks that we're not going to be discussing today. But the person who should be introducing you is the person who's introducing you. And you should be giving that person an introduction that does, in fact, mention your expert and authority status. And the third thing a lot of people do is they fail to give people what I call a verbal outline of the three things that you're going to cover. Now notice I'm saying three things. When you get longer than that number of things, people are not going to remember them. And if you really want people to remember what you're going to do, the rule of thumb is you tell people what you're going to tell them, you tell them, and then you tell them what you told them. So giving people that verbal outline gives them an understanding of what you're going to be sharing, and it'll be much easier for them to follow your presentation. And then the other thing is failing to memorize a powerful opening sentence. Now, I'm one of those people who's not a big fan of memorizing talks because that's a sure way to make yourself extra nervous. I don't have that kind of good memory period. And the other thing is if you memorize a talk, and then you happen to forget a line in the middle, it can throw you off entirely. Much better to memorize your outline. But what you do want to memorize, and this is what I learned from the very first speaking coach I ever had, is to memorize your opening sentence. Because if you don't start out with a strong beginning that's full of pizzazz, you are setting yourself up for having a very bored audience. No fun. So what do you do instead? You use some success strategies to engage what I call the eager attention of your audience, and I'm going to share those with you right now. Now, you can pick the ones that work the best for your presentation, and when I say the ones, you can use more than one. So you can start out telling a story. People love stories. They will remember a story long after they have forgotten anything else you've shared. And you can get people moving. Now, why is that sometimes appropriate? So if you're a speaker who's speaking after 2 or 3 other people, and notice that lady over on the left who's practically falling asleep. As my husband likes to say, the mind can only absorb what the tush can endure. So if you are speaking after people have finished eating, or if they've already heard a couple speakers, or somebody has been droning on and on before you, putting the audience to sleep, the best thing you can do is invite everybody to stand up and do some stretches or something like that, walk in place, get people's blood circulating again. That will immediately get them far more alert and able to listen to what you have to say. Then you can quote an expert or a study. For example, when I was giving my keynote address at the annual gala of the International Association of Top Professionals, where I was honored as Top Public Speaking Coach of the Year, I started out with a quote, and this is how I started. According to my favorite American philosopher, Mark Twain, there are 2 types of speakers, those who are nervous and those who are liars. Now, by the way, notice how I paused after my favorite American philosopher. I wanted to get everybody a little nervous so that when I said Mark Twain, everybody got a little bit of relief and knew something funny and wonderful was coming. Then you can ask a conversational question. Not just any question, you need to ask the right question. Ask a question that is specifically that will specifically be answered by the information that you are sharing. And then you can say something totally unexpected. Kind of like when I started out that quote saying my favorite American philosopher and then followed it by saying Mark Twain after a pregnant pause. That kind of got people alert. So these are some ending landmines. Failure to review the 3 things that you covered in your presentation. When you don't review the 3 things you covered, when you don't tell people what you're going to talk about, and then you don't, after you said the first thing is this, and the second thing is that, and the third thing is that, that's giving them the verbal outline during your talk. If you don't kind of give people an understanding and a review of what you're saying, they're going to be confused about what was presented. The other thing is if you ask people to do more than one thing. You've talked about several different things and things you feel it's important for people to do, but the fact of the matter is that people cannot keep track of more than one thing to do, so they have to be thinking, which one should I do? And so they do nothing. So if there's something you want people to do, make sure it's only one thing. And then when you give people several things to do, they have to choose. And the confused mind always says no. So keep in mind that when you are giving a talk and you want people to do something, think what is the single one most important thing that you would like people to accomplish. And by the way, when you're thinking about your presentation, decide that first so you can build your presentation around what you want them to do so that they will actually be inspired to do it. So the ending landmines are the failure to review the 3 things you covered, asking people to do more than one thing, asking people to choose among several things to do, and you guessed the last one, not memorizing your powerful and inspiring final sentence. It's really important to take the time when you are creating a presentation of any sort to think about how you want to start and how you want to end it. Those are the things that people are going to be most likely to remember, is how you start and how you end. I'm willing to venture that after all these years, there are still some people who remember that quote from Mark Twain about the two types of speakers, those who are nervous and those who are liars. Because the fact of the matter is that public speaking is the #1 fear on the list of fears. And everybody, I'm saying everybody, gets nervous before they have to speak. Now, there may be some situations where you've done so much speaking that you don't get nervous in that situation anymore. But put yourself in a new situation, or put in some people in the audience who are powerful people, that's when you get nervous. I'm working with a client right now who has a huge problem with being nervous before speaking. And he has to chair meetings in his position. He has a position in a corporation, and he has to regularly chair meetings. And we've gotten to the point where he is comfortable doing that. But we're still working on one other piece. And that is when his boss asks him a question for which he has not, had advance notice or had time to prepare. He's still really nervous in that situation. So we are working on some strategies to help him deal with that. The fact of the matter is that anytime you are in a new situation where you have to do some speaking, and by the way, please remember, public speaking is not just giving speeches. It's any time you talk to somebody other than yourself. It could be when you're calling a new person on the phone. It could be when you're going online and going to be on a Zoom event. There are all kinds of situations where you can get nervous. So having some plans about what you'd like to say in certain situations is a good way to handle those nerves. So when you are able to take the time to figure out what is your powerful and inspiring final sentence, that is going to be a thing that's wonderful to do. So what do you do instead? I've kind of started alluding to it. So we're going to talk about in greater detail now some success strategies. This is the goal: to inspire your audience with a compelling message or to take a purposeful action. You may just want to share a message, but you won't get them to take a purposeful action, by the way, if your message isn't compelling. So it's take a purposeful action if you want them to. So again, I'm inviting you to pick what works best for your presentation, and possibly a combination of 2 or more of these suggestions. Tell a short story or anecdote that kind of sums up the point, or the most important point that you want to share. Invite a single call to action, a direct single call to action that you make very clear. And if you want to make it even stronger, you can contrast the results of the action versus taking no action, and ask people which result they choose. And of course, the no action you want to paint in as negative colors as possible. So basically, you're talking about a plan, a task, an action that you would like people to take, and you're inviting them to do so, and hopefully everything you have shared is going to inspire them to do so. And you can then use a quote to bring your point home. If you can find a quote from somebody who is considered an authority and expert, borrow their authority and expertise, find a quote that really fits what you want to share. And that is a wonderful way to make your point. So we talked about some major landmines to avoid. And just kind of as a summary of what I've shared, you want to avoid not giving your audience a verbal outline of the major points you are sharing. both at the beginning and end of your remarks. Not doing that, people just hear you talking blah, 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 blah. And you're not making it clear the things that you want them to remember. And the other advantage, by the way, of saying the first thing is this, da, 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 people know exactly where you are. They know approximately where you are in your remarks, and they're less likely to be thinking, oh my gosh, how much longer is this person going to be talking? When they know you've spoken on the first point, and now this is the second, and now this is the third, they know where you are. You are giving them landmarks, verbal landmarks or outlines of exactly where you are. And because you're numbering the three things that you're sharing, they're more likely to remember, oh, the first thing was this, the second. And if they forget it, they can ask, now, what was the second thing she shared? What was the third thing he mentioned? I can't remember it. The thing is that all kinds of studies show that people's memory for verbally presented information is awful. A day later, they remember maybe a quarter of it, and a week later, forget about it. So that's why if you want people to truly remember what you've shared, numbering it and making it clear, this is what I'm going to talk about, these three things, here are these three things, these are the three things I mentioned. And so your remarks are meaningful and not blah, blah, blah. And the other thing is not preparing and memorizing both. I forgot to write in the word both, a compelling opening sentence and an inspiring closing sentence. You want people to be so inspired by what you've shared that if you in fact have a call to action, that will make it more likely that they will actually do whatever you're inviting them to do. But in any case, you will have opened their minds and hearts and thoughts to whatever message you are sharing. And so the major strategies to embrace is to give your audience that verbal outline of the major points you're sharing, and prepare and memorize that compelling opening sentence and inspiring closing sentence, and deliver them with power and pizzazz so that you end up with, ha-ha, a standing ovation. Well, I don't guarantee the standing ovation, but an audience that is clapping because they truly appreciate the value of what you've shared. So that's my take on how to start and end your presentations with pizzazz. And as Margaret pointed out, the only word you can't spell in Scrabble. It's amazing what you learn on these coffee and coaching clubs. And,
Marjorie?
yes.
Before you invite people to the next one, we got a question that I think I hope doesn't put you on the spot, but people would like to know your inspiring closing for your keynote.
Oh. Oh, well, it was a quote. I finished with the three rules to follow for an effective presentation. I call those the 3 B's. Be brief, be memorable, be seated.
Okay. And then I guess you sat down.
Yeah, well, yeah,
After your standing ovation, of course.
Well, no, nobody was, listen, Margaret, this was the least favorable opportunity for speaking. I do not like to speak when people are at a meal, and this is a gala dinner, and I was invited to speak when people had been served their salad. So I do have the video of that on my website, vibrantvocalpower.com, and it shows both the introduction and then my talk. And if you listen carefully, you will hear some forks clunking against the plates. People were sitting at round tables, which means some people automatically have their back to me. That is to me the least
Favorable.
favorable way to speak to people who are, if you're talking to people and there's food, and they're at a table where there's food, to me, you come out as the third priority after the food, the conversation, and then there's you and your talk.
Mm-hmm.
So
Okay.
so I'm glad by the way, I did get some chuckles in some of the remarks I made, and I did get nice applause. But as I say, if you listen carefully to that video, you will hear some forks clunking on the plates.
Okay, well, go ahead with your invitation, and then we've got 2 or 3 more questions to get through.
Okay.
And remember, everyone, if you have questions, put them in that Q&A box, and we'll get them.
Yeah, just float your cursor over the bottom of the screen, and that's where you'll find it. Okay, so now we've talked about beginnings and endings. Now we're going to get into the middle. Because, when you need to make a presentation, you're basically writing something. And for a lot of people, that kind of creative writing is really scary. It's overwhelming. How do you do it? So I was having a lot of fun with this title, obviously, because I had to underline out, under, and over, getting out from under presentation preparation, overwhelm. Because every time you're asked to speak, especially if it's the first time you've asked to speak on a topic, or it's a very important situation, or maybe something really important depends on it, like you're defending your PhD thesis, or you're aiming for a promotion, or you're aiming to get a big purchase from somebody where you're making a sales presentation. All of these things can be really scary, and trying to figure out what you can write and how you can write it and how you can put it together in a way that is most likely to fulfill your goals. That's something that we're going to be talking about at our next Coffee and Coaching Club. So Margaret, what?
Yes.
What
So what if I say what I'm going to cover and it looks like people zone out right then?
Then that means that you have not verbalized them in a way that sounds exciting. It's really important what type of words you use. They make a huge difference in whether people think something's important or not. And so what I invite you to do is to think about whether or not the list of what you're going to be sharing is stated in the way that's most attractive. You want to talk about something that, if you're talking about, say, for instance, your 3 points are about a major issue, then you want to state that in a way that makes it clear that this is a real problem. What is the real pain? And just saying that there's a problem with our water supply. But if you say something about, does your water supply, there are 3 questions I'm going to be answering in this question. How to find out if your water supply is actually safe for you to drink. You want to figure out what words, what kind of way can you express something that will get people concerned enough to listen to what you have to say. By the way, my favorite spot on the internet for research is thesaurus.com. If you think that the word that you're using is boring and has no punch, the word powerful is so overused these days. If you want to use a different word that gives you the same or similar meaning, or you've thought of a word and it's not quite exactly representing what you want to say, go to thesaurus.com, put in your word. It'll give you a bunch of suggestions. And if they're not exactly what you want, but you find the one that's closest, then you can click on that and get some more suggestions.
Mm-hmm.
It's really important how you message your message, as it were, that you use words that are intriguing rather than boring.
So the next question is, any pizzazz in the middle?
Absolutely. Absolutely. All the things that I talked about as beginning and ending are things you can use in the middle. Stories are, making your point with a story is really powerful. People love stories. That's how people remember things, as stories. And I remember being at a family event, and turns out I was the oldest member of the family there. And all of a sudden they started asking me about family stories, and they wanted to hear stories about this one and that one and so forth and so on. People love stories. Think about what you want to share in terms of stories, and then go searching for quotes that make your point. Those are kinds of things that you can do. And if you are doing a PowerPoint, as I am, you can go search for some pictures that make your point. I mean, my favorite one, I think, for making my point was this one.
When you put that up, I was reminded of all the Charlie Brown things on TV, where all the adults are like, wah, 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 wah.
I got my master's in audiovisual education. So if you're giving a talk and it's in person, and if you have some show and tell things to share, that's wonderful too, because people, and one of the things perhaps that I should be talking about one of these days is how to use your body and movement to underline the importance. Because if you just stand there like a lump,
Mm-hmm.
that's pretty boring too.
Right. So this came in, I know we're getting close to out of time. This came in when you were talking about your client who had still gets a little flummoxed when the boss is in the meeting and asks a question. And I noted the time because the question that came in was, that's a great question, a stall tactic?
No, actually, it's a very smart tactic. And I will very briefly tell you my method, seeing you asked about it, for handling when somebody asks you a question that you can't answer off the top of your head. And I remember one of the gals I was talking to said that when she was asked about something she wasn't prepared for, she felt like an idiot, that all of her coworkers would think she was, didn't know her stuff and so forth and so on. So the method I've come up with and the acrostic for it is ACID, A-C-I-D. A is acknowledge. And by the way, you will hear everybody do it. Margaret, the phrase you used is absolutely acknowledge. The point of this is to give your subconscious time to maybe channel to you the perfect answer. Oh, that's a very good question, or that's a very interesting question, or something like that, or thank you for asking that.
Mm-hmm. I'm glad you asked that, yeah.
I'm glad you asked that, but C is for clarify. And the reason you need to clarify is my belief is you cannot give a good answer to a bad question. And sometimes people will ask you a question that is so broad or so vague that, there's no way you can answer it. So that's when you say, I'm not really sure what you're asking about. Could you give me an example of what you would like me to talk about? Because that forces the other person to clarify his or her thinking. Because as I say, you cannot give a good answer to a bad question. And no matter what answer you try and give, you won't sound any better than the questioner did with the question. And by the way, fake it till you make it, to me, is not a good strategy, because everybody's BS meter is always on and they will know. I mean, we humans hate to admit when we don't know something, but that's where you get to the I, which is to inquire. You know, that's not something I've had an opportunity to give any great thought to or to study. Is there anybody else here who could answer that question? That's if you happen to be in a group of people. Or you can say to the person who's asking, you know, that's not something I thought about. Do you have any ideas about it? And the D for the acid is for either deliver or delay. If you don't know the answer, say it. You know, that's something I have not studied. I need to get back to you, and I'll report at our next meeting, or I'll let you know in 2-3 days, or you know, that is Betty's area of expertise. She's the right person to answer that question for you. Or say you get a gift from your subconscious and you deliver it. Now, saying you don't know something, people think that that blows your credibility. When you actually honestly say that you don't know something, to my mind, this is counterintuitive, it actually increases your credibility. People then know that you give an honest answer to everything that you are asked, and if you don't know, you say so they can truly trust your word.
Perfect. Okay.
So that is the end of the story, and we are out of time. And I thank you very much for joining me, and wish you all a good day. Bye-bye.